The snack was had. I had an everything bagel though, and I might have poppy seeds in my teeth.
I had cheese and crackers, and I definitely have crackers in my mouth, and I'm going to try to refrain from making any gross noises with my mouth.
It's fine. We can edit that.
We'll see. Yeah, maybe we can edit that out.
Hey guys.
Hello. Hello. How are you all today? We're feeling pretty loopy here. I'm Abby.
I'm Ronnie.
This is Dragons in the Details, where we pick apart our favorite fantasy series over an undetermined number of episodes. This is episode 6, I think. I'm not sure. I'm losing count. But we think it's episode 6, and today we are going to talk about the dragons, guys. We're very excited. We have a lot of notes on this one. Last episode, we were talking about the venom, and we kept saying, well, we'll talk about this next episode. This is that episode. So we're excited to be here. This season, if you don't already know, we are talking about the Empyrean series by Rebecca Yarros. We will talk about all 3 books through the end of Onyx Storm. So this is your spoiler warning. Consider yourself warned. I truly have no sympathy for you if you keep listening past this point. But also, I feel like you're going to know if you're clicking on this podcast that it's a spoiler-full podcast, whatever. Anyway, other disclaimer, these books sometimes have spicy material. This will sometimes be a spicy podcast, not for children. Again, like the last episode, I don't think there's that much spicy material to talk about with the dragons, but you never know.
But like rated R, like sometimes we F-bomb. So just be wary.
Yeah. Sorry. Yes. Yeah. Sometimes we curse. This is a cursing friendly podcast. Can't edit myself to not curse. Sorry. We come with receipts. We have quotes. We at least have ideas of quotes. Sometimes we don't remember the actual quotes because we're doing this live, because we're remembering things live and we're like, oh yeah, I remember when he said that. We're sorry about that. If that really bothers you, we will put the quotes in the show notes. No one has said anything about it yet though. So for now, we're going to keep trucking along the way we've been trucking along. This episode is focused on dragon politics and the Imperium, as we mentioned previously. Ronnie, anything to add before we get into it?
I'm just so excited to talk about the Empyrean, finally.
Yeah, this is going to be a good
Yay.
one. This is going to be a good one.
I've been waiting for this one.
All right, our intro question this week. It's a good one. It might be a divisive one. Ronnie, who is your favorite dragon?
Interesting that you think it's going to be divisive. Okay.
Well, because I think I know who yours is, and I think I know who mine is, and I don't think
really
they're the same.
I'm curious whether you get it right, because if you get it right, like this friendship runs way deeper than I ever imagined. My favorite dragon is Sgaeyl.
Okay, that's not what I thought.
Did you expect that?
No.
My favorite dragon that we like know, right? Because I'm not going to
really
choose Ashmere. Yeah, right. My favorite is Sgaeyl, and I feel like you probably expected mine to be Tairn. I do adore Tairn. He is the father that I actually do have, but an additional father. But I think Sgaeyl I have a special love for because she is. We don't know a ton about her, but we do know that she is absolutely fierce in battle, but also fiercely protective of everybody that she loves. And it extends even to Violet, even when she's unhappy about it. And that just, I think she has like a really big heart for a dragon, even though she doesn't emote well. And I identify with that. Yeah. And I just also think she's funny. She, like, the way that she treats Violet, she's like, you are the biggest inconvenience I've ever experienced. But she does it with this love, even though she is, like, before Tairn showed up at Sgaeyl, probably the most fearsome dragon out there. And I just love a power lady. So I love Sgaeyl.
I'm saying this with nothing but love as your friend. Have you told your therapist that Sgaeyl is your favorite dragon?
There are jokes that I can't make on this podcast.
Into that one with that.
Yeah, there are jokes we can't make on this podcast about why that's funny, but it's funny.
All right, unexpected plot twist there. That's fine. I'll recover. Okay, my favorite dragon is Andarna.
For sure.
For the sole reason that she says to Tairn, "Can you fly while insulted?" Which I think is one of the funniest lines.
She is written. So funny.
The sass on this girl, like I was Andarna at a certain point in my life. It's so funny that neither of us chose Tairn, because I'm with you. I love Tairn. I think he's a great character. I think he's so funny, but like, yeah, I don't know. Like my heart belongs to Andarna. Sgaeyl, okay, yeah, I don't know. I think I am curious to learn more about Sgaeyl, because obviously we don't get as much time with Sgaeyl.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love the way she defends her men, for sure. I love the way she's no nonsense. Yeah, But I love Andarna's whole story, right? She doesn't know who she is, but she's fiercely protective of Violet. When she tells all the elders, all the Irid elders, that they undervalue and they underestimate the bond between her and Violet, I'm like, holy shit, that's a crazy thing to say to all these powerful dragons you just met. Like, basically telling them, you're stupid, fuck you. I thought that was great. I think I'm really excited for Andarna in book 4 when she's come back and she seems like she's a total badass and knows exactly what's going on. I think that's going to be really exciting and I'm here for it. And I really love the evolution of this character. And I love her sassy teen years so much. I think she, like, the dialogue that Rebecca writes is so good. I just love it. I love
I
it so
also
much.
think that one of my favorite scenes in Onyx Storm is the one where Andarna is like acting out her life up to that point. They like make a point to note that she's like jumping up and raising her front legs, and I just picture like this small child explaining to this row of like grown adults like, this is what happened, and then I breathed on the venom and he died. Like,
Okay,
so
this
funny.
just made me think of this. Have you seen the video going around from Rebecca Yarros's book tour? Where I think it's the New York show. The moderator is, I can't remember her name, but she's an Olympic gymnast. She's amazing. I love her. But she's reading out like reader questions. And the question starts, has Xaden ever used his signet too? And then she like pauses because obviously everyone thinks it's going to be like a sex thing. She goes, has Xaden ever used his signet to do a shadow puppet show? It's an amazing question.
Definitely no.
Yeah, Rebecca said no, but I don't know.
That's funny.
But yes, I love that. I've also seen a lot of like How to Train Your Dragon memes, I guess, of the dragon dancing on the beach, like explaining something. I haven't seen that movie either, but I think
That also
Andarna's.
was a great Sgaeyl moment where they rejected her and she was like, she is a credit to our riot. That is my adoptive daughter you're talking to. Like, get out.
Yeah.
Get out.
Yeah.
Love her.
I mean, this whole story doesn't happen without Sgaeyl, right? Like, Violet gets no dragon without Sgaeyl. If
Yep.
Sgaeyl had not been there at Threshing. Absolutely, 100%.
She's critical.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, sorry, quick water break. All right, are we ready to dive into questions? Cue question deep dive music. Corrections, omissions, social media shout out. Sorry, we're not ready yet. My bad.
Sure. Okay.
I shouldn't be driving today. I'm drunk.
She's not driving.
I'm not drunk. I'm not drunk, and I'm not driving.
One social media shout out. No real corrections and omissions at this point. I put a former correction or just clarification on how we think about Dragon's power in another episode. We'll obviously get way more into that in this episode. We posted a reel this week, or a TikTok, depending on where you follow us, about how Tairn and Sgaeyl are surrogate parent figures to Violet and Xaden, which I think works out really well and is really sweet. Like, Sgaeyl is a fierce and terrible and frankly loving and tolerant mother to Xaden, and Tairn is a grumpy curmudgeon-y father figure to Violet. And I had one commenter that made me giggle. Miracle Perez 23. She commented, skull emoji. I thought you were gonna say Asher died, so Tairn's gonna die. And I said, well, that too. That was my favorite social media comment of the week. She said, no, because I can feel it coming too, and I can't handle it. You and me both, Miracle Perez 23.
Well, you guys are just ruining my precog theory. It's fucking ruined.
Not crazy enough. You need to work on these.
I know. I just go so crazy on the questions that I'm like, I don't have anything left.
Yeah, it's fair.
Anyway, okay, my only omission is this is kind of a doubling down. No, it's not a doubling down. And we don't necessarily need to answer this question here. We could do it more on a signet roundup. But we mentioned a couple weeks ago that Violet was the only one who had the signet ability to kill a venom, right? This was our Xaden episode.
Mm-hmm.
I would argue that perhaps Riddick and Rhiannon can also kill venom.
It's not who I thought you were going to say, and I had a thought. So
Great.
let's keep going on this.
Okay. We know Rhiannon can summon, right? We know she can summon through doors. How soon until she summons someone's heart out of their body? Why wouldn't that be possible, right? As far as I'm concerned, that could be coming. And then she can kill venom without having to touch them.
That would be fun.
I think Rhiannon's signet could be far more powerful than we've ever given thought to.
Crazy.
Yeah.
I think it has huge potential to be crazy. I mean, she can go through walls. Like, there's something here.
Yeah, and we don't know what the distance is either. Like, how far away does she have to be from something to summon from it? Riddick, we know he froze that wyvern. I mean, I know some people think Riddick was straining from the wyvern. No, he's freezing the wyvern, right? like as it stands. So if he can get close enough to a Venom and touch them, I think he can freeze them from the inside out. We know they can survive fire. I don't know if they can survive ice, but that was my thinking. Who are you thinking?
I was thinking Mira because she now has the ability to conjure wards, and it said, I think verbatim, I should find the quote. I didn't really prepare for this particular discussion.
Sorry, this was a curveball.
That the wards are powered by the very thing that kills Venom.
Yeah.
Or the very thing that kills the Venom powers our wards. Something to that effect.
Well, Xaden says it when he's like explaining, what is it? It's something, yeah, the daggers power the wards. Xaden's saying it when Violet's like, why wouldn't we give the flyers these daggers to protect themselves? And he's like, it's because they power our wards, I think is the conversation we're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds right. And I mean, Mira can create these, like, she can create wards now. And so I feel like that could evolve into something that can directly kill Venom.
There's so much to talk about with Mira's signet. It is just fucking wild. Like, it is a wild signet.
We need to do a signet episode.
Like, is Mira the culmination of all 7 dragon species? Like, how is this a power? How does this exist now that we know more about what it takes to raise the wards? How is this possible? I don't know.
Don't know. Yeah.
I don't know.
Like, actually a crazy signet.
Yeah.
We just accepted it as it was, and then we learned that it takes 7 breeds of dragon flame to power a ward, and now we're like, she can do what now?
And why can't Mira just put like a ward around Xaden at all times so that he can't channel? Whatever. Anyway.
Much to talk about. Not this episode.
All right.
Okay.
Deep dive.
Deep dive. Yes. Right. Okay. I think you're going first, so I'll ask you the question.
Okay.
Okay, Abby, review and discuss the structure of the dragon population.
Great. Let's start at the beginning. Did you realize that there are 2 Empyreans in this series?
Who's the second Empyrean?
There is an Empyrean at Sgaeyl, and there is an Empyrean at Orisha. They are different. They have formed a separate governing body. And I'm going to tell you why we know that.
But he says you have the support of the Orishan riot. We'll see how the others find out in the morning.
When Kaori gets to Tyrrendor, right? Kaori comes later, I think in Onyx Storm. He gets to Tyrrendor. He says, I want to see how this Empyrean functions. So I think there are 2 separate Empyreans here. I think the Orishan riot has completely extricated itself from the Sgaeyl riot. Yeah. I mean, it's just Kaori. He doesn't know everything. That's what we know about Kaori, that he really doesn't understand dragon politics, but this is in here. So we're starting off strong here. That is the only quote I have to go on. But it is now my understanding that there are 2 separate Empyreans within this book.
Well, and then in that case, like, Tairn's an elder.
Exactly. In that case, Tairn's an elder. Right. Yeah. Tairn is now an elder and a member of this Orishan Empyrean, Tyrrendorian Empyrean. And Violet is now the Duchess of Tyrrendor. Holy shit. She might have some more power than we could possibly imagine.
Yeah. I think she is incredibly righteous, like arguably irritatingly so.
I don't know. She's a little Machiavellian too, but like she thanks Zinal for Traeger's death. Like, I don't.
Yeah, but it destroys her. Yeah. Anyways, we'll talk about her more. Okay. All right. So there's 2 Empyreans. Didn't process that, but
that is my
very
understanding.
Much heard it as like Tairn. When they were editing, we'll call it the Wardstone, when they were modifying the Wardstone, says you have the full support of the Orishan riot. We'll see how the others find out in the morning.
Yeah, but that could mean all 200 dragons as opposed to just the Empyrean, because we know that the Empyrean at Sgaeyl is split, right? So the riot is split at Sgaeyl, but the Orishan riot encompasses the Empyrean. But yes, that is my understanding. If there is an Empyrean in Tyrrendor, Tairn is now an elder and a member of that Empyrean.
Okay.
I don't have a so what there. I don't have a follow-up. I just think that's an interesting fact that will probably bear fruit in later books.
Probably. Yeah, I would guess.
All right. Okay. So we know we have our 6. I'll just do a brief rundown. Black dragons are the smartest and most cunning. Their ancestral grounds are Orisha, which I love. Obviously, I was going to bond a black dragon and then fall in love with a man from his ancestral grounds. Keen dragons have
sorry to interrupt. Should we also just talk through like notable ones?
Yes.
That exist?
So I have that all here. Don't worry.
Okay, great.
All right. The notable black dragons are Kodag and Tairn. They are the only black dragons that are not hatchlings. There are 2 hatchlings that hatched during Onyx Storm, but these are the only 2 elders. As we just discussed, it seems that Kodag is an elder in the Basgaeth Empyrean, and now it seems that Tairn is an elder in the Orician Empyrean.
And the only dragon of the first 6 that we know is black through.
Thoreau. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
He is mentioned extremely offhandedly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
By Tairn.
By Tairn. Yeah. All right. Yeah. So the dragons are Kodag and Tairn. The riders are Malgren and Violet. Green dragons next, keen intellect and rational countenance. Their ancestral grounds are at Basgaeth. I'm saying the ancestral grounds for a reason. We'll get to it later. The dragons of note there are, I have no idea how to say this name. Kyr? Quir? Kyr?
Yeah, Bodhi's dragon. Yeah.
Bodhi's dragon, Ferge. I actually don't know how to say Ferge either. Is it Fergie? I don't know. And Taine, which are Bodhi, Rhiannon, and Mira.
Yeah. Kruth was Quinn's, and
sorry,
Quinn is
I'm
no
not
longer.
including dead rider. Sorry if you didn't know Quinn was dead. You had your spoiler warning. Reds are quickest to temper. Their ancestral grounds are the limestone cliffs at the edge of the Dunas River, which is in the south. The notable red dragons that we have are Cath, Day, Slisiag, and Thort, which those riders are Dane, Liam, Sawyer, and Sloan. Orange, unpredictable, always a risk. Their ancestral grounds are the northern Esbins. The notable orange dragons are Bade, Bruggen. I don't know why I included these. Bade, Bruggen, Glane, Marb, and Solus, who we know is dead. So those riders are Jack Barlow, Carr, Amber Mavis, Imogen, Brendan, and Varish. So obviously there's a trend that the orange dragon riders are not the best group of people, but we also have Imogen and Brennan in there. If Imogen turns out to be bad, I'm going to fucking revolt. I love her so much.
I know. I'm of the camp, like, Brennan can be bad. Fine. Whatever.
Yeah.
Imogen, I'd lose it. Like, I can't do it.
Yeah. And I have been seeing a lot of theories on social this week that, like, Imogen is over here erasing people's memories right and left, specifically Violet's. I don't know. I don't think so, because Violet knew when her memory was erased. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Whatever. All right. Browns, we don't know that much about, but the major brown dragons are Aimseer, Atrum, and Trad, which are Lilith, Riddick, and Garrick's dragons. And then blue, they are of a formidable size and ruthless. Their ancestral grounds are near Athabine/Corden. So their ancestral grounds are actually outside Navarre, which I think is interesting. They're kind of the only ones that are outside Navarre. Those dragons of note are Sgaeyl and Molvik, whose riders are Zayden and Eric. And then, of course, we have the Irids, which we don't know that much about.
For the Browns, I think we also learned that they like the cold. So I don't know that that means anything about their ancestral hatching grounds, but I've seen some theories about them potentially being from, like, near the Emerald Sea.
Yeah, that would make
sense. Up there.
But I think the northern... Oh, no, the Aspens are not. Yeah, that could be. Yeah. All right. So I kind of had a question here, and this gets into the Unbriel request for 12 dragon eggs, 2 of each type.
Mm-hmm.
Is what determines a dragon's color, because we have all this information about ancestral hatching grounds, but then Tairn says at some point, technically, and this is about Andarna, technically she was gold when you bonded her. Not even she knew what color her scales would mature to. Only the eldest of our dens can sense the hatching's pigment. In fact, this is when he says, in fact, 2 more black dragons have hatched in the last year, according to Kodak. And we know that different dragons of different colors can mate. So, like, what is actually determining a dragon's color there? Like, I feel like that's a question I have. And you have that look on your face like you have the answer.
I don't have the answer. I just think it's really notable that it's definitely not genetic purely. Right. Like, it's not a guarantee that any dragon is going to be any one color if only the elders can sense it. Right. So, like, Tairn and Sgaeyl could have, like, we don't know what would happen, right? But they could have a hatchling. Could it be black or blue? Are those the options? Or is it anything?
Right. Is it anything? And how does that work with the ancestral hatching grounds, right? Because they're by color, right? Like, so, like...
Yeah, I think it's an interesting point. I think I have in my head assumed that the unification resulted in a melting pot of dragons, and prior to that, the dens more or less lived as dens. And so, like, there were not really many questions as to what the color of any given dragon would be, because 2 greens were mating and they had a green.
Which leads me to believe that Tairn and Sgaeyl are either going to have a black or a blue.
A black or a blue, yeah.
Yeah. But which one it is, I don't know.
Don't know.
Well, right. Okay, but no, hold on. 2 black dragons just hatched. We only have 2 black dragons and they're both male.
Yeah.
What's
So
going on
I think
here?
it actually could be not random's not the right word, but chosen in a different way.
I'm
Like
just so
Andarna
confused. Yeah.
didn't, I mean, Andarna actually is kind of a poor case to look at because she didn't have parents, right? Like she didn't
I assume
know.
she has some parents, but yeah.
Well, yeah,
Yes.
she
Yeah.
didn't have parents in the Vale, and so it was super unclear, and like she's not a great indicator. But yeah, two black hatchlings. I also think though, do we
Are those
know
Kodags? No,
there's also
because they hatch in Orisha.
yeah, so it might be determined by hatching grounds. I don't know. Two black dragons hatched in Orisha. Their
Great
hatching grounds
point.
are in Orisha.
Oh my god. Wow. That's a great point. That the color is determined by where you hatch if you're not at the Vale. But I don't know because the Vale was the green ancestral hatching grounds, right? So then every dragon would be
Yeah,
green who was born there.
yeah. I don't know. Unclear.
All right. Well, that's fun
We
to
don't know how a
ponder.
dragon gets its scales.
We don't know how a dragon gets its scales. In conclusion, that's really all I had. What did you have on this one?
I mean, this is really like a things we know question, right? So we talked about how we kind of heard that Brown liked the cold. We know that Sgaeyl does not like the cold. We know that the elders kind of seem to operate as rulers in some regard, and we know that we think a dragon lifespan is maybe a couple hundred years. Like Tairn
Yeah.
is called middle-aged at 100
If he
ish
is 100, yes.
if he is 100. And so in terms of lifespan, that's our best estimate at this point, which I don't know where that puts like Coda
Yeah.
necessarily.
Is it Coda, not Kodag? Okay. I don't. You listen to the books and I haven't, so I don't know.
I don't process the dragon names. I never know how to I never know how to say the dragon's names. I think Lilith's dragon is Ashmere though because of Ashling Cuff. I
You
think
just gave
the
away
Gaelic
something about
AIS.
us to a very specific group of people.
We talked about cross country on another episode.
We did.
If Ashling Cuff, if you're listening, big fans.
We love you. We love you.
She's a runner for everyone who's unfamiliar. Yeah, not too much more on this one. I mean, just I think the dens are interesting to think about.
Yeah. I think there's a
Yeah.
lot of fundamental questions about how a dragon gets their scales.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
That was actually like a good unexpected question. I did not have that one down.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
And whether or not there's one Empyrean now or two Empyreans.
One or two Empyreans. Sounds like two. Good to know.
Kaori certainly thinks there's two.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Next question.
Dragon's power.
Yes. Please, Ronnie, describe the dragon's power and how they have it. What is the difference between Irids and the 6 other dragon breeds?
Yeah. All right. So we'll start with the second question because it's a bit of a leading question, right? We know from Onyx Storm that Irids are magic and the rest of the breeds seem to have a source that's not them intrinsically. We know this because in Onyx Storm, Tairn, while they're flying over what's the name of the sea? I'm blanking on it. They're flying over the ocean. And Tairn says, Andarna shows
The
no signs of
Arctile.
trouble. What?
The
Oh, yeah, the
Arctile.
Arctile. Yeah, the Arctile. Thank you. Tairn says, Andarna shows no signs of trouble. I am inconvenienced, annoyed, and cut off from my source of power, strength, and my mate's thoughts. But I am still tearing out of like his whole family line, right? I do love Tairn for that reason. He never fails to make a hilarious old man joke. So that's what Tairn says.
Well, and I've heard theories that about from people that when Tairn is reciting his whole line, he's actually just talking about himself and the various names that he's had throughout time, which I think is possible.
Well, in that same flight, I think it's mentioned by Violet that he stops at Thoreau, though. Stops at the first dragon
Yeah.
to bond.
Right. As if there's
So,
no right. Yeah, I
yeah.
think you're right.
So, I don't know.
Or maybe it's the other way around. Maybe he stops talking once humans bond dragons.
He stops talking when humans spawn dragons. That's right.
Right.
That's it. Yeah. So, I don't know how that would... I don't know. A lot of questions when it comes to Tairn. We have an entire question dedicated to it that Abby will cover. But we know that Tairn says, I'm cut off from my source of power. The Irids say, we are magic. The male replies like it's the most obvious reason in the world. The female says, you are magic, a note of sadness in her tone, and yet all you seek is to use it for violence. And then we hear, you are Irid, you are magic. Not you are dragons, you are magic, you are Irid. And so I think we can infer, right, that Irids have intrinsic magic and the Navarian dragons, the Empyrean dragons, have a source, some source. Irids also seem to be accepted as like legend or extremely rare. Theophany says in Onyx Storm chapter 11, she's the one who tells Violet, right, that Andarna is an Irid. She says, yes, you're Irid. Some don't believe, but I knew as soon as the cream robe scholars whispered. We know that Irids are magic of legend, not often seen. The rest of the breeds have a source. And so if we accept, right, that non-Irid dragons' magic come from a source, I think we need to think about This is where I start to sound crazy. So just blink twice if I
Also
sound
have a
crazy.
crazy. Okay, no, keep talking. We might have gone down the same road here.
The definition of Empyrean is the highest circle of heaven. So
I didn't
I
know
think
that.
dragon magic comes from a source, and I think the source is the Earth asterisk, right? Like my precog theory is related to this. So I think the source is the Earth, but I think that the magic is the power of the gods. I think the gods played a role in dragons having magic, and for whatever reason, these 6 breeds maybe fell. Maybe it's just because they imparted magic onto humans, or for some other reason their magic is diluted. But I think probably through sharing their magic with humans, they kind of lost their own, or they do not have their own, for whatever reason, right? Inherent magical rights and ability to be like the Irids. Did they lose the trust of the gods? Are they fallen angels for some reason? I don't know. But there are 6 gods. I know that there's 7 dragon breeds, but there are 6 gods. There's Amari, there's Dune, there's Malik, there's Zynal, there's Loyal, and there's Hedian. Hedian? Don't know. So their power comes from something. How it was bestowed upon them, I think there's 6 everywhere, right? Like I think it can be connected to the gods. And for some reason, the Irids are a 7th that just have it. Thoughts?
So under the questions for the first note, I put my god comps for each dragon because I think you're right.
So did I. Wait, tell me. I want to compare. I was worried it was going to sound too absolutely whack. Okay.
I have more thoughts on this question specifically. I did not really focus on the gods for this specifically, but yeah, I mean, it's 6 gods, 6 breeds of dragons. That is not a coincidence in my mind. The number 6 is all over here. And right, as you said, we know that dragons, these 6 breeds of dragons have to pull from a source. Irids seem to be their own source.
And I'll just add, right, because we said it in the last episode, but maybe you listened to the last episode last week. There is an epigraph in Onyx Storm chapter 57 that states, dedicating oneself to temple work isn't just a noble pursuit. Becoming high priest or priestess is the closest most of us will get to touching the power of the gods. The rest are riders, implying that being a rider gets you closer to touching the power of the gods.
Right. Fuck, I love this. All right. So my before we do this, I do feel like we have to touch on this because I do think a couple episodes ago we said that it wasn't clear if the dragons were pulling from a source or if they were their own source. After doing the research for this episode, the dragons are definitely channeling in my mind because they lose power when they lose when they leave the continent, right? So Irids are their own source. Dragons have to channel. I know we might have contradicted ourselves in the past. We're learning, we're growing, we're getting better as people every day.
Well, I also think before this book, there was no allusion to the fact that dragons were not a source of magic.
Right.
Like, even Xaden was like, I'm trying to channel Sgaeyl's magic. Like, it was very much noted as a possessive. But yes, we are growing.
Okay, so black dragons. My comp is Dune, obviously.
My comp is Amari.
Ooh, all right. My green dragons are Amari.
My green dragons are Hedian because they're pragmatic and like knowledge.
I hear what you're saying. That might be a stronger one. My red dragons are Malik.
Okay, I wasn't strong on red and brown, so my red was Loyal, but I don't have a good reason for it.
My orange is Zinal because they're unpredictable and always a risk. That sounds like luck to me.
Totally agree. Yes. 100%.
I think brown, I didn't write this down, but brown is probably my Hedian. And blue, based on what you said at the beginning of the episode, blue is Loyal to me, right?
Interesting. I had blue as Dune.
Okay. I'm totally open to it, but I have specific reasons for why I think black is Dune. And we also, none of this might be right.
I mean, yeah, we could be so far gone that this is actually an insane conversation to be having. But maybe talk through your reasons. We can go by Den, talk through your reasons, and then I'll talk through mine. Maybe mine aren't always great.
The black dragons are war machines, right? Like they are just purely bred, not bred, but like they exist for war. So that's why I went with Dune. The reason I went with Amari for the green, one, because she is the queen of all gods, and we know the green hatching grounds become the hatching grounds for everyone, right? So it's that idea of like we are above all of them. And Rhiannon is specifically described as looking like Amari, and her dragon is green, right? Fergie is green. Ferge is green. That's why I went with Amari for green. Red, just because it said quick to temper. So that, I don't know, Malik came to mind there. I could see the Loyal comp as well. I don't really have a great one. Orange, we already talked through. Unpredictable, always a risk. That to me sounds like luck. Brown, I mean, Hedian was the only one left, basically. So I went with brown.
Okay, fair.
But you just convinced me with your Sgaeyl thing. Like, Sgaeyl loves fiercely.
I know. I could see being loyal. Yeah. I think I took a slightly different route where I looked at like the roles of the dragons and their riders. And so maybe that does point to Dune being loyal, but I chose Amari for black because the black dragons seem to lead everyone. Like Koda seems like he's doing it all. Tairn leads every other dragon of every other color basically when they're in battle. That could also totally be related to Dune, right? Because they're in war, but he seems like a clear leader. Both of them do. Dune I liken to blue because Sgaeyl is so fierce and ruthless, but now I'm thinking maybe actually blue is Amari because Molvik also bonded a royal.
Yeah.
Actually, they've both bonded royals in some regard, nobility. So maybe blue is maybe Hedian. I actually thought was like a slam dunk green because
I see what you're
green
saying.
are so like pragmatic and like not. I forget the exact quote. I can pull it up in our reread
I
notes.
have it. It's keen intellect and rational countenance.
Yeah,
But do you think the people of Hidotas have rational countenance? I don't know.
I think they want to.
Yeah.
I think they're a bunch of hypocrites, honestly.
Yeah.
Final, I totally agree with you, is orange. And then I didn't have great reasons for red versus brown between Loyal and Malik. I will say, like, I don't think of Malik as hot-tempered at all. I think of him as, like, a peaceful god who's collecting souls and laying people to rest sort of thing. So, I don't know. I didn't like him that too quick-tempered.
Yeah, I could see red as being loved, too, because we have... Well, this is interesting. So, Liam was had a red dragon, which I thought was really sweet because now Dane and Sloane also both have red dragons and they're obviously in love with each other. All right. Anyway,
dragon's power. That's my bet. But you had other things other than the gods.
I did. So I agree with you that dragons, these 6 breeds of dragons are channeling. I mentioned this quote in our last Venom episode. But this is from the fable. Violet is describing the fables of the Baron. She's describing the different fables. Another talks about the dangers of wielding power from the ground instead of the skies, as one could easily start drawing from the earth and eventually be driven mad. This to me sounds like a 6 breeds of dragons versus Irids comp, right? We know that the Irids are magic, but they also seem to draw power from the sky. These 6 dragons are drawing power from the ground. They will eventually be driven mad. Are the dragons slowly being driven mad because they are channeling essentially from the same source as the venom? Like, is that something that we need to be talking about? I think that's up for debate. We'll talk about that more later. The next quote about Fables of the Barons we get is the one where they talk about the dangers of bonding dragons, right? That's the quote where no doubt they were written as a parable to warn us the dangers of bonding dragons. But in Navarre's 600-year history of unification, I've never read a single rider losing their soul to their powers. The dragons keep us from that. The riders might not be losing their soul to their powers, are the dragons. Because, again, same thing. Also, other things to consider with the Fables of the Barons specifically. There is a theory I've seen, and that I like, that the Fables of the Barons was actually written by Asher for Violet. Like, this is actually his first book for her. And the reason for that is because we know that the border towns have an oral history, right? So Rhiannon knows about the Venom, but it's tales that have been told to her. Same with Xaden. It's not a book that's written down. Xaden's father told him to eat his broccoli or the Venom, we're going to come get him, right? There's no record of this book in the archives. We know there's a cover-up, but Justitia can't find it anywhere. It is possible that Violet is the only one that has this copy of the Fables of the Barons. In which case, Asher is warning her about the dragons, right? I think that's...
And he wasn't a writer.
He wasn't a writer, right. I think that's something to ponder.
Yeah. I had always, I guess while we're talking about dragon's power, I had assumed that dragons, because we know that at least the Irid breed is magic, I had assumed that they had magic at some point, or they were made such that they could have magic at some point, and they actually like grew and purified the magic in some way before riders could channel it from them. I guess I didn't think about the fact that maybe their soul is. So I guess, are you saying that the six breeds channel from the earth and the Irids channel from the sky? Is that what you're arguing?
I'm saying the six breeds certainly channel from the earth. I'm not clear if the Irids channel from anything or if they are their own source of magic. I have heard theories that the Irids channel from the sky because they don't lose the magic when they go off the
Yeah.
continent, but like that could
Yeah.
also be because they are their own source.
Yeah. Yeah. I think they're their own source. I think you're right. Okay. Interesting.
But yes, my theory is also that this power has also corrupted the dragons much more slowly. Not corrupt, but driven the dragons mad, right? Much more slowly than
Yeah.
it would for a human.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking if you drain that much magic, eventually it will wear on you. Maybe. I have one more point here. Dragons aren't the only animals capable of channeling powers to their riders. Griffins from Paromial also share the ability, but dragons are the only ones capable of powering the wards that make all the other magic but their own impossible within our borders. We'll talk about this kind of later when we get into the Irids leaving, but dragons aren't the only ones who channel, I think is an important point there, right? So in theory, this magic can be shared. Like, why is it only dragons and griffins? Are there other creatures that could have also potentially channeled? We don't know. But dragons and griffins channel, dragons, griffins, and venom can channel from the earth.
Yeah.
That's how I'm reading it.
Okay.
And I think it's interesting that this might get to your point. This is really interesting. We also know that all dragons have this intrinsic gift when they're born, right? The feathertails have gifts and then they lose it. And then the dragons start channeling, right? Like, why put that in there? It's clearly different, right? It's clearly different things. So, like, why put it in there that each dragon has its own gift to kind of start its life and then it loses it? Like, that I think is an interesting.
They lose it when they get their fucking scale colors.
Yeah.
So do Irids just like not, well, I guess Andarna did lose it. I was going down the path of like, are they all born magic and then something
But
about
Andarna
them.
chose a color, right? Like she
She
chose
shouldn't.
black, not permanently.
She chose a color, but she's Irid, so she could be whatever she wants.
Yep. So
But does the gift going away coincide with your scales becoming a certain color?
well, I think we need to think about this the way we think about when Jack turns venom, right? And he loses Bade's power. And Berwyn says this at the end, like, I'm gonna kill your dragon. You're going to have to channel to replace that power. Is it the same idea? You're gonna lose your gift, you're gonna have to channel to replace that power, just as a dragon.
Yeah, true. What are the dragons lying about?
All right. I think there's a couple things here, and one of them gets into why did the Irids leave, so we'll get there later. All right.
Quick recap. I had what are the dragons lying about? Why did the Irids leave? What has Tairn been doing his whole life? And then we close with like, is the Empyrean corrupt as like a confirmatory thing?
Right. And I just didn't even make any notes for that one because the answer is yes.
Okay.
All right. So what are the dragons lying about? Hold on. So I started with the quote that you read last time, right? So in the hope and excitement, this new development of bonds between dragons, griffins, and their humans bring, I wonder who has stopped to contemplate the nature of magic's balance. Do we not risk the equal rise of the very powers we seek to wield? And I'm just going to give you the overview of my thesis for this question. I think, I don't know how to answer this without answering the next three questions, but basically, I think the dragon's choice to bond with humans is what led to the venom, right? And you kind of got to this before too, right? It is not, I think the dragons have gotten greedy with their magic. They specifically talk about how the wards prevent griffins from channeling, which makes no sense. Why would you not want the griffins to channel if you guys are in an alliance against the venom, right? Does that make any sense? If the dragons have gotten greedy and they are the reason for the venom being powerful, that is what they're lying about. But I'll dive into it a bit more. So first question is around that quote. So are the dragons responsible for having signets, right? So we can assume, obviously there were no signets. There were no like signet powers before dragons and humans bonded. So the venom might have been draining, but they couldn't really do anything, right? Like all they could do was really drain people. But when humans bonded dragons, I think we can assume that is when the venom started having signets. So at the very least, that decision made the venom more powerful. Like every decision that the dragons and humans have made together has in fact strengthened their enemy rather than weakening it, which is kind of a really scary thing to think about. That's my first one. The second one is this hatching grounds sacrifice that we are told about, like kind of over and over and over again, right? So like people, there's Devera talks about it in Battle Brief, like we really overlook the fact that sacrifices were made for the original unification. Like not only did we lose all these cultures, but we have to think about what the dragons gave up in giving up their ancestral hatching grounds. We know that the hatching grounds at Basgiath are like a magic factory, right? We know the energy within the hatching grounds at Basgiath could power the Venom for decades, right? If you have moved your hatching grounds to a new location, does that mean the magic in that ground is now gone? Did the dragons actually create the barons when they moved their hatching grounds? Have they actually removed magic from the land, making their allies weaker, making their enemies weaker too?
Stop tapping.
Because we know, like, I'm trying to like organize my thoughts here. Basically, okay, so here's the quote. Many historians choose to ignore the sacrifice made by both humans and dragonkind to establish Navarre under the First Wards in favor of raising the spirit of unification. But I would be remiss not to mention the losses suffered, both in terms of ancestral hatching grounds of each dragon breed and civilians who did not survive the continent-wide migration that resulted from the opening of Navarre's borders, or those lost when we closed them, right? So it's idea that, and we know that when the two dragons hatch in Orisha, the black dragons, I believe, we know that when they hatch, the magic changes, right? So in moving all of these hatching grounds within Navarre, have they damaged the land outside Navarre? Have they made those people more vulnerable? And why would they do that?
I think they definitely did.
Kind of my second point.
Yeah.
All right. So that leads me to my third question, which is kind of wackadoodle, but basically, did the dragons actually drain the land of magic? Not the Venom, right? Are the dragons actually responsible for the barons not having any magic? Are the dragons responsible for the islands not having any magic, right? We know we've talked about Tairn being sketchy about Unbriel, like, and I'll get that into more with Tairn, but like, is everything that we've been taught was actually the Venom, the fault of the dragons, the decision to consolidate this power behind the wards and just kind of say fuck you to everyone else?
So how would that have worked? Like if they, I'm struggling with this one a little bit. If they moved their hatching grounds, you're saying that the barons just drained, or are you saying like the chain of events that they set off led the Venom to drain? Tell me how the barons end up with no magic.
The barons are back. Maybe this is all a bad example. The idea is basically that the dragon eggs are what causes the magic in the ground, but that doesn't really work.
No, I think it does. I think it does. That's how I understood it, at least. I mean, the continent is relatively contiguous, and the Barrens is pretty far away from the hatching grounds. But, like, Tyrrendor didn't have hatching grounds for a really long time.
Yeah.
And still had
there
magic.
was still magic there. Yeah.
Romiel still has magic.
Yeah.
But the Griffins might have hatching grounds there as well. The Isles don't have hatching grounds, and we felt some magic in Zahilna, but we knew the Irids were like right across the water on some other isles. So I do think the hatching grounds causes a proportionately large amount of magic in any given piece of land. I agree with that.
Yeah. So my basic idea is that by consolidating all the hatching grounds behind Basgiath, the people of Navarre and the dragons of Navarre were basically saying, magic is ours, you don't get any.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
Agree.
That's basically it. Like it wasn't as altruistic or to defend against the Venom as we think. It was a consolidated power grab.
And you think the dragons lied by omission in that regard? Because we're talking about what the dragons
orchestrated it. I think it was the dragons' idea, but we can get into that more later.
Okay. I went a totally different way with this question. Like, I went a little bit more pragmatic on, like, what are they lying about, or what do we know that they're lying about? But I think, like, the culmination of where it's going could amount to that, for sure. I didn't get too deep, honestly. I mean, like, names, obviously.
Yeah.
Like, we're lying about names. People are saying different names to bond riders of a certain lineage so that they can produce multiple signets so they can be stronger. I also did talk about the time, and I'm losing track of what episode we're on, right? So so everyone's clear, Tairn loves to recite his line. He loves to tell Violet all of the stuff about his line. And he told her while they were flying across the Arctile a bunch of stuff about every dragon that's ever been in his lineage, but stopped at the dragon stopped in chronological order at the dragon that first bonded a human. So once she says once humans were out of the picture, apparently it stopped being interesting. So he stopped telling her about that. So Tairn is lying all over the place. Like we know this. This is not surprising. Also, just like Tairn and Sgaeyl and pretty much every dragon, I think, withhold a lot of information from their riders. I also think that they're lying about whether the Empyrean is taking a side in the Benin battle. Like they say very early on in the books, like the Empyrean has chosen not to interfere. I think that's total bullshit. Like I think there's definitely sides. I just don't think there's a united front that they can publicly voice. And I also, this is a bit of a rogue one, I also think they're lying about what a signet actually is. So the Irids say, while you gifted your human with ice, pointing to Atrum, you armed yours with lightning, points to Tairn. And Riddick says, that's not how signets work. He starts to argue. And the Irid says, and you, our very hope, have handed this human something far more dangerous to wield, haven't you? He just ignores Riddick. He's like, actually, I'm not listening to what you say about how signets work, and I think it's because we're being told the wrong thing about how signets work. I think signets could be just an outright, you're gonna do this type thing from the dragon.
Because the dragons are like named for their signets, right?
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that part is just Rebecca being funny because like we know that the riders of the previous riders of these same dragons did not have these same signets. But I think they're lying about basically everything, honestly. And I think it has to do with what started the Great War, which we'll get into in the next question. Maybe we can just go there.
Okay, so let's think about this a little more in conjunction with my right. So we're told that dragons bonded with humans because they didn't have opposable thumbs to weave runes, basically, to protect them from the venom.
Mm-hmm.
You think that dragons just have these powers that they gift to people?
I think they're lying about how signets work.
I think they
decide.
Okay.
I don't know that these two necessarily play into each other. Maybe we should pitch each other our ideas for the next question because I think they could be quite different based on where we're going with this. So we can defend ours and then come back together and see what makes sense.
All right. So you want me to pitch this
for Irids leaving?
Yeah.
Why did the Irids leave?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I will need to start a totally independent pitch from yours. So you pitch yours, and then I will pitch mine.
The first one is what we talked about last episode. Was that the original Irid rider or one of the original six turned venom? The first Irid rider, the one who was supposed to ride the Irid, turned venom, or the original one of the original six turned venom. And we know, just some background for this, I know we're pitching, but we know that the Irids left like right after they fired the Wardstone because we have that epigraph from Lyra. I know we've mentioned it a couple times, but just so everyone is clear, what's not clear is when the Irids arrived or if they arrived in the first place. I don't know if the Irids are from the Isles or if the Irids are from the continent and then pieced, or if the Irids were from the Isles, came 17 years before the Wardstone was fired to lay Andarna's egg, and then also came to fire the Wardstone. That's not clear. But we know something happened with the original six that caused the Irids to completely forsake humanity and other dragons. So I have kind of the human angle of this and I have the dragon angle of this.
Mm-hmm.
The human angle is one of the original six turn. The dragon angle is that the Irids it gets back to the Griffins, right? And it gets back to why would you leave the Griffins out of your protected area, right? Why would you be so selfish as to keep all this power to yourself and not let the Griffin riders into Navarre? Why would you specifically make wards that only allow dragons to channel when you know there's another breed of good people and they're Griffins who would benefit from the wards as well, right? Why would you specifically do that? And we know that we understand that this was an active choice made by the original six, right? Because it's runes that are woven. And we know there's a specific rune that doesn't let the Griffin fires have their magic, right? Why would you make that choice if you're not trying to hoard all of the power for yourself, especially if the power is finite, right? So we talked about this with Venom last time, right? Eventually the ground is going to run out of power. If the dragons are also channeling from the ground, then basically they're competing with the Griffins for that power. So I think that might have been
the dragons are hoarders.
The dragons are hoarding power is my theory.
Okay, understood. Yeah, I mean, makes sense. They literally walled themselves in. They were like, you can't have it. Interesting. And so that's why you think the Irids left is because they didn't agree with that. Like,
yes. So there's
activity.
Some quote about, let me find it. All right. So the quote, yeah. So our breed is born for peace, not violence like the others. So already we're distinguishing that these dragons are born for violence, right? He
Mhm.
spares Tairn a single glance before returning to Andarna, looking at Tairn, right? So, like, violence. You were left behind as the criterion, the measurement of their growth, their ability to choose tranquility and harmony with all living things, right? That to me is kind of
Mhm.
the this is about griffins, I think.
Yeah.
We'd hoped you would
Yeah.
return to I mean, they do then say we'd hoped you'd return to tell us the humans had evolved, that they had blossomed under the ward stones and no longer use magic as a weapon, but instead you have shown us the opposite, right? So, but the all living things, that to me is like griffins.
Yeah. So the dragons couldn't play nice with the griffins or the venin, like, and they also couldn't like maintain a natural bond with humans because the venin existed, and so the Irids left.
Yeah. I think it was the decision to I think it was the decision to leave the griffins out of the wards. That
Yeah.
yeah. That's my
Interesting.
pitch.
Okay. So
What's your pitch?
when the griffins were ostracized, the Irids were like, "That's it. You're bad. We have to leave."
I think so.
That makes sense. It does make sense. It's just interesting also like how little the griffins are spoken about by dragons. Like the dragons are like fine with them. We're like, okay. Like, or certain dragons are fine with them, right?
Well, and I think what's interesting is that it's not only that the Irids left, it's that the Irids were completely covered up, right? Just like the Venom were covered up. Like, because at Basgaia, there's the Rotunda, right? And there's only 6 dragons in the Rotunda, not 7. Like, why would the history of the Irids been like completely wiped
Completely
out?
erased. Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally. I think that is super important. So my pitch as to why the Irids left and what their end goal is, I think goes back to why the Great War happened. And I have very little to go off of this, so just like roll with me for a second, okay? And you can poke holes in it. I think the root of the original conflict was whether to allow humans to access magic at all. Like I think before the Great War, humans didn't touch magic. It was basically the dragons, maybe the griffins, magical beings that had access to magic, and the humans were just around. Like normal world, dragon's world, we're just living in it type thing. And I think when the dragons, someone bonded someone, right? Like some human channeled or a dragon bonded a human or something, and humans touched magic. And at that point, Venin existed somehow. And the Empyrean, I believe that the Empyrean was fighting for, we can sustain a civilization in which humans coexist with us. And the Irids were like, no. They are corrupt. They wanted magic. Look at the Venin. They're an abomination. You can't live like this. And so I think the Empyrean, I know we talked about there being 2 Empyreans. Pretend for my sake that there's one.
There's
'cause
only one during
there's one at this time.
Yeah.
So I think the Empyrean is partially a literal control experiment on whether dragons and humans can coexist, humans having access to magic in like a controlled manner. And so I think the Irids left Andarna as a criterion, and I also think they helped imbue, I know that's not really what they did, but basically imbued the continent with magic by breathing into the Wardstone and by leaving Andarna, by giving them enough raw magic to conduct the experiment over those like 600 whatever years. And they wanted to see whether humans can be trusted, because that's what they said, right? They said Andarna's not being tested, dragons aren't being tested, you are being tested, humans are. Humans could be trusted with magic, and I think it goes back to why less dragons are bonding too. They wanted to see whether humans could be trusted, and dragons are realizing that they can't because they're turning. And so the more the Empyrean, so the Empyrean is like, and they might be like under the gun somehow, I don't know, but the Empyrean is this like group that needs to test this and see whether it works. But I think internally they're getting more and more divided in their stance, and fewer dragons are choosing to bond. And so the Irids said, look, you guys can try this, but I know that it's not going to work. I don't think it's going to work. The Venin are terrible. Like, we get okay vibes from Irid to Rider, but we get terrible vibes from Irid to Venin. And so the Empyrean communicate that they're unbiased, because they have to be, because they're basically like scientists running an experiment in a controlled environment, and they cannot interfere with the outcome. And so I think the Irid's end goal is a world of peace, but I think beneath that, I think it's actually, because they're kind of assholes, right? I think it's more that they want to be proven right, that humans have no business with magic. And I think the true conflict is dragons versus everything else, basically. Or maybe living beings versus everything else. And the Irids are the ones who think that humans can't be saved. While we've been led to think that they're actually the answer to saving them, I think they're actually just the complete opposite and enemy of Venin.
I mean, they're definitely total dicks.
Yeah. So I think the Empyrean is a control experiment. I think the Irids like gave them the okay to proceed with it, but they're like, I'm not going through with it. And I think the Great War was just about whether humans should have access at all. Also, like side note, not really related to the overall theory because it could be applicable to yours too. I'm not entirely convinced that the Irids actually left the continent.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, it
Zayden
could
has the
be.
throwaway line that's like, unless you think Aden was able to hide on the continent without the Empyrean knowing. And like from what we've seen with the
Totally
Irids, I think
possible.
that's absolutely possible.
All right, so this brings me to an interesting point about what the Irids can and can't do.
Mm-hmm.
We have been told three separate times, we have been given three separate occasions where the bonds between riders and dragons are cut off. The first one is at the end of Fourth Wing when Violet is stabbed by the dagger that has the poison, the venom dagger that has the poison. She is cut
Okay.
off from Tairn and Andarna. So we know that venom have a poison that can cut you off from your dragons. The second one is the RSC serum when they
Mm-hmm.
give
Yeah.
when they
Well, you're talking in general. Okay,
yeah,
not by the Irids. Okay.
yeah, not
Yes.
by the
Yeah.
Irids.
Serum, agree.
And then the third one is the Irids, right? This does not seem like a coincidence to me that the Irids and the venom both have this capability. Granted, one is distilled into a poison where they can cut off riders and their dragons, right?
Yeah.
I am wondering if there's like, I don't know, is there a common origin here? Like, if you are right and this is all an experiment, like how do the venom fit in? Like, do the Irids create the venom as part of the test to see whether or not humans can handle magic? Like this.
Well, I think the venom is like the failure. The venom is like the humans who can't handle it. The humans who are like, actually, we don't want to share. We're going to go do it ourselves. Like, it's basically the Irid version of humans, where they're like, we're actually just going to channel power directly. We don't need you. And the
That's
Irids are like,
interesting.
we don't live with humans. We're good with this power.
And we
Sorry.
know, and there is that line about how venons like can totally disappear in the dark. We know Irids can disappear all the time.
Yeah, anywhere.
Yeah, it's yeah, and they are both covered up. Like there's a lot of parallels here between the venom and the
Yeah.
Irids.
Like the Empyrean basically said, okay, we're gonna live in this world. We're gonna pretend that the venom don't exist, and we're gonna pretend that the Irids don't exist, and we're just gonna see what happens. But we're gonna pretend that we're at war with the Griffins randomly. Like the Griffin part is not terribly well explained in that theory, except for that maybe like the Griffins don't seem to have the same problem. Like the Flyers don't seem to have the same issue in which they're losing.
No, they are.
Are they?
They're losing people to venom. Absolutely. That the recruiting line is from Cliffsbane Academy. That it was only in the last 50 years we realized they started recruiting.
Then I don't know how the Griffins fit into that. Then in that case, it's basically, yeah, it just gets back to who you consider like a natural holder of magic. Like I think the Irids are the only real one that we're currently faced with.
I feel like we're on the edge of like a breakthrough and I just like can't quite get there. I like can't quite put the pieces together.
I think my precog theory will either get us there or take us so far off track that you're going to be mad about it.
All right, cool.
Okay. What has Tairn been doing his whole life?
All right. We're going to get into why I chose Black Dragons as being cops for Dune, right?
Mm-hmm.
Basically, first question, has Tairn really only had two riders? We've talked about this. He's been alive for 100 years. As far as we know, at least 100 years is what he's claiming, and we know Naolan was his first rider. If you're doing the math out, that would mean he was unbonded for 89 years.
Yeah.
He is a war machine. Why would he be unbonded? Right? Like in my mind, unbonded dragons don't fight, but maybe I'm wrong about that.
I think they fight. But I don't think that they.
But they're not living to their maximum ability, right? They're not granting human signet powers. No, well, we can assume Tairn knows about the venom. He certainly knew about the venom at the beginning of Fourth Wing. We don't know if he found that out during the Tirish Rebellion, but basically we have 89 years unaccounted for here. We also know, we talked about last episode, how sketchy, not last episode, this is like 3 episodes ago, how sketchy Tairn was about Umbriel. I found even more quotes about Tairn being sketchy about Umbriel. Like Bodhi says, let's just fly straight to Umbriel. And Tairn says nothing. Like he really is very, very sensitive about Umbriel. It seems like he or someone from his line has been there, which kind of gets to my ideas about the magic and the eggs. Like we have talked about how there is a dragon comp. We don't agree on the dragon comps, but basically there's a dragon comp for each god.
Yeah. Agree.
Each god has an isle, right? Like,
Valid.
is this actually where the hatching grounds were? Or is this where, in your theory, the dragon stole the magic from? Like, is this, how do the isles fit in here? Because Tairn is being so sketchy about Unreal. It is like impossible for me to believe that Tairn has not been to Unreal or does not know something about Unreal, which is why I think he's the doomed comp, right?
He could also, yeah, I agree with you.
Okay. So that's what's his Tairn been doing his whole life. I don't know. But I want to take us back to threshing, right? We are told that Tairn shows up at threshing because Sgaeyl called him to help defend Andarna from Jack and Orin and whoever the other fucking guy was who didn't matter. That's what we're told. Andarna is defenseless. She is the eldest of her den. No one can tell her not to go to threshing, so she goes, but Sgaeyl comes and keeps watch over her. And Jack is going to try to come kill her. But what we actually find out after that is that Andarna could fly. Andarna was never actually in any danger, right? She could have flown away at any point. So why does Tairn summon Sgaeyl? Or why does Sgaeyl summon Tairn, right? Violet shows up. Violet with silver hair shows up, right?
Yeah.
And we know that Tairn is super fucking sketchy about Unreal. And we know he calls her Silver One, right? So is it not that Andarna needs protection? Is it, hey, Tairn, the girl you've been waiting for is here. Time to show up, you know? Like, is that what actually happened? Does Tairn know? Does Tairn suspect that a girl will come with silver hair who is touched by Dune, who he has been waiting for, and that she is the one that he has to bond with? That is my current working theory. And the reason I think that is because also Sgaeyl leaves, right? Why wouldn't Sgaeyl have just interfered? I know Xaden can't interfere, but Sgaeyl can certainly interfere. Sgaeyl would have no problem fucking Jack up, right?
Yeah.
Like, we know she's a fierce mother protector. We've talked about that.
Yeah.
Why call Tairn? It's not like Sgaeyl can't fuck people up. And she leaves before Tairn gets there, right? So I'm not really buying the it's to protect Andarna theory. We also know that right after Violet and Tairn bond, Tairn says to Violet, I know exactly who and what you are, Violet Sorrengail, right? Which is, again, a weird thing to say. He's just met her, but he not only says who, he says who and what. What do we now know she is? She is touched by Dune.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So that's my theory. Sgaeyl sees her. I mean, I assume Sgaeyl knows about Violet because Xaden has talked about Violet, but maybe she does not realize Violet has silver hair. She sees the silver hair. She says, Tairn, get the fuck over here right now. You have to bond with this girl. That's my thinking.
Interesting. And I think it makes sense, right? We have gotten undercurrents from Tairn knowing something about Violet that we don't for the entire series. I think he also just knows, we know that he knows a lot that we don't. And so he could have been exposed to Venon's side through Naylan. He was exposed to Tyrish's side, we know. Yeah, that's interesting.
Right. I mean, right. So my other thing I had in here is he's revered as a battle dragon among their kind. If not for him, we probably would have lost during the Tyrish rebellion. Why? What did Tairn know? When did he know? If he knew about the venom, why would he fight against the Tyrish rebellion? He's so clearly aligned with Tyrandor now. You know, I just think and I don't have an answer for that one. I just think that points again to things happened during the Tyrish rebellion that we don't know the answer to and that did not happen the way we've been told.
Yeah. Yeah. I also just kind of feel like Tairn is the Xaden of the Empyrean. Like, Tairn he is very Machiavellian.
Yeah, I agree.
He totally could have ended the Tyrish rebellion, knowing that whatever happened next would need to happen in order for the Venom to actually meet an end or a resolution of some type. Yeah, I think he's got all sorts of sketchy stuff.
What do you think Tairn has been doing his whole life?
Well, we know, like, Tairn was not a secret, right? So, like, we knew that Tairn existed. He was bonded to Naylan. He's about 100 years old, so we've been told. And Naylan was allegedly his first rider, which I think you and I both think is somewhat ludicrous.
Yeah.
Like, to have been doing nothing for 80 whatever years.
Yeah.
Like, what have you been up to?
89 years.
Yeah, well, Atrium is 20, so, like, call it 70, right? Like 70 years of being able to bond and choosing not to. I think the part that I think is most interesting to think about when I think about what Tairn has been up to is 2 of the 5 years between Naylan and Violet, we know he was near Biscaeth because Sgaeyl was bonding Xaden, or bonded Xaden at that time. And so I wonder whether like something happened in those 5 years. Like we don't know where Sgaeyl was at before that, right? Tairn was defending Navarre against Tyrrendor. Sometime in those 5 years, Sgaeyl bonds Xaden, learns about everything that Xaden's dad fought for, everything that he's fighting for, learns more.
Sgaeyl knew about that. The dragons know. That's why they're bonding the marked riders in the family line to give them second signets.
I'm trying to rationalize like why Terran's change in behavior, if there was a change at all.
Well, right. So what you just said brought me back to Naolan, right? Because they say so many times mated dragons usually bond the same year. Why didn't he bond one of Sgaeyl's years? Is it because he was with Naolan?
He knew that he was
Well,
with
there's
Naolan.
two. There's two options. One, he's waiting for Violet.
I thought you were going to go with he's waiting for Violet.
One, he's waiting for... I don't think it's like a prophecy thing necessarily, but I do think it might be like, hey, you need to come see this girl with the silver hair. You know, like you need to come see this girl who's touched by Dune. I don't necessarily think it's like he knew she was coming, but he does say, I know who and what you are.
Yeah.
But
he could easily just recognize silver hair for what it is.
Right.
Yeah.
But was he with Naolan? And is that why he wasn't bonding in Xaden's year? Because he had a bond already.
Yeah. Yep. Tairn's our mystery man. I just can't. I know I said this in the last episode. I can't get over how much he knows. Like, he knows so much. It's crazy.
I know.
He knows everything Sgaeyl knows, believably, right? And then he knows about Naolan. He knows about Brent.
Violet isn't thinking to ask these questions. We're asking these questions.
I know. Okay. We've been talking for a while.
I know.
All right. Should we round out with whether we think the Empyrean is corrupt and why? Okay. So, we wrote this question, full disclosure to all listeners here. We wrote this question fully knowing and believing that our answer was going to be yes, the Empyrean is corrupt. Still sort of think that, but I believe that the Empyrean is basically a dragon mirror to Navarre in some ways. Like, yes, it's a governing body. Yes, it's corrupt, but there are members like Tairn, Sgaeyl, and Andarna. Same with Navarre, right? There are members that still stand up for what's right. One example being Violet requests, well, actually, interestingly, right? Like, I think generally the fact that Andarna is an elder, basically, is a fascinating, like, point in all of this. Violet requests Andarna's help, and she agrees regardless of the Empyrean. So we know that Andarna is going to do whatever she needs to do, regardless of whether she has Empyrean support yet. Sorry, context, right? When Andarna and Violet decide they're going to go try and find the Irids, Andarna had already made up her mind. She's like, we're going. I'm going. Whether I need to defect from the Empyrean, whether Violet needs to defect from Navarre or Risha, whatever, like, we will go. And then the Empyrean does approve it, and Mira is hurt, based, like, the fact that she didn't tell her. Violet says the Empyrean hadn't approved it yet. She was always going to go, she being Andarna. At least now, Andarna is able to make some demands this way. So we know that as a governing body, like, they make somewhat reasonable decisions so far. But when asked, and sorry, we also know that Tairn is willing to defect. We know this. He's like, don't ask too much about my rules or you'll find out how willing I am to break them. Those are quotes that have been said by Tairn. And also, when asked how the Empyrean feels about things, Tairn, when altering the Wardstone, said, you have the full support of the Orician riot. We'll find out how the others feel in the morning. So you've already kind of brought up this point, but Tairn has multiple allegiances and does not necessarily, what's the word? He doesn't necessarily default to the Empyrean's belief.
He's a free thinker, for sure.
He's a free thinker. But we also hear Andarna say multiple times, the Empyrean will side with whatever choice you make. So I think Andarna has a clear say.
Which she could be lying about.
She could be lying. But why would she promise on behalf of the Empyrean? Like, what would she be getting?
Just to make Violet feel better? I don't know.
Fair. So the Empyrean is corrupt, but I think it's a Navarrian form of corrupt in which they think that they're doing the right thing. And I also think it's possible, based on the fact that we think that they have deity allegiances, that they're somehow affected by or deferential to or cursed by their gods and need to achieve, like, are working to achieve peace. I think they have some motive, and we've talked about, like, all the possibilities for those motives as we've discussed this episode. I think they're Navarian version of corrupt.
I certainly agree that there's a difference between is the Empyrean corrupt and are all dragons corrupt. I think Tairn and Andarna and Sgaeyl, I think every dragon we know and love is good.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe with a couple of exceptions. But yeah, I think that every dragon that goes
What
to
are the
Tyrrendor, I
exceptions?
don't know, it's just Rebecca. You never know what she's going to throw in.
Yeah, sure.
I'm just leaving that door open. Every dragon that goes to Tyrrendor, I think we can say is fighting the good fight. But there's also a quote. So this is also why I kind of believe that the dragons are trying to hoard power. There's a quote about how originally when the army was made, the army of Navarre was made, the commanding general of the army could have been from any of the quadrants, could have been a scribe, a healer, an infantry, or a rider. And then about 400 years ago, which I think, or maybe it was about 200 years ago, but I think it was about 400 years ago, which is when the Venin cover-up starts, they change it so that the commanding general of the army is always a rider. Right. And that to me just kind of like reeks of corruption, reeks of power grabs,
Yeah.
reeks like that is bad news. Right. And I think it's the dragons. I think it's the dragons saying, hey, this is bullshit. You guys have to listen to us. Like we can't be arguing with scribes and healers and infantry there below us.
Yeah.
I maybe have not done the best job of explaining this theory, but I really do think that in my mind, the ward stones exist as a power grab. The ward stone exists as only we can have the magic in this land that we need to sustain ourselves, right? And we also know that it does benefit the dragons, right? Because the griffins die when flyers die, but dragons can outlive their riders, right? So like the bond between the griffin and the flyers, like they sustain each other.
Yeah.
But dragons can outlive their riders.
Yeah.
For the most part, no problem.
Yeah. Interesting. I think dragons definitely are. I don't think you did a poor job selling that theory. Like dragons
You look very unconvinced.
Power grab. Well, I think the lead up to me was confusing. But the fact that dragons set borders within which only their powers work is totally power grabby. Like
I think it's
100%.
really sketchy when we know that there are other people out there, other creatures out there fighting the good fight, but the dragons aren't letting them in. That makes absolutely no sense to me.
Yeah.
Or you can come in, but you're going to lose your power.
Yeah. And that wasn't even a human related call, right? Like I'm sure that I mean I'm not sure, but their borders were open for some time. Right. And so if griffins came in, I'm sure that the humans would have been amenable to flyers living within their borders and wards allowing flyers and griffins to channel.
Yeah. Well, we know that, right. We know that Tyrrendor is okay with it. We know it's a decision that was made because they unmake it, right?
Yeah.
Whether or not it was the dragon saying it or the humans saying it, to me, it doesn't make much sense for the humans to make that decision, right? If they're fighting the Venin, they need as much manpower as they can possibly get. We're getting a guest. But if the dragons and the griffins are channeling from the same source and they are competing for those resources, this is how you deal with that, right? This is how you say, okay, fuck you, only I can channel from the source, which is a limited power supply.
Yeah. It just doesn't sit right with me that randomly 6 of the 7 breeds of dragons have to channel from a source.
Well, maybe they were punished by the gods. Maybe it's not that they stole the power from the gods. Maybe they originally had power and the gods punished them and now they need to replace that power.
That's what I think, but then who's the 7th god?
I don't know, but I definitely think there is one. We're finding all these secret 7ths, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's like, I think at the root of it all, that is what I think. I think the Empyrean and the 6 dragon elders represent effectively fallen angels that were gifted power of the gods, lost it because of some unthinkable sin.
Maybe
probably
they got greedy.
Giving it to humans.
Maybe
Probably getting greedy. And then they were punished and basically told, hey, that's it. Like, your power supply is now finite. Find a way to make it work with all living beings, and for whatever reason the Irids were able to retain theirs, and that's the current state of the union. But I just like that's the only thing that like twinges at the back of my mind with like this particular theory is like why the Irids, why not the rest of them, and are they being punished for what they're doing with the wards, with anything else, everything else basically.
Yeah, I think there is certainly an original sin with the dragons, whether it is about whether it is like they created the venom or whether it is they stole magic or something else that we haven't even thought about, whether those two things are in fact the same thing, I definitely think Rebecca's setting us up for that. Like they're just too sketchy. They're just too sketchy
Yeah.
to not.
Yeah.
But I don't think, I mean, I've also seen like the reels that are like, oh, like when you realize that the Venons are actually the good guys and the dragons are the bad guys. I don't think that's what it is. Like, I don't think it's that cut and dry. I don't think
No.
it's that black and white.
No.
I think there is corruption within the dragons the way there was corruption within the humans. Exactly what you said.
Yeah, totally. I mean, we're so set up for this like channeling creature battle, right? Like we don't know how the Great War started, but we know that it ended with those three creatures having different territories, and that was like the way that everything was resolved. Was the Venom were over here, the Griffins were over here, and the dragons were over here, and the humans were just around. Like they were just wherever they were.
Yeah. Right. It was never really a battle about humans at all.
No. Yeah. Yep.
All right.
Okay.
You want to get to precog? I can go first because mine's not crazy like yours.
I feel like we've almost touched mine, but yes, sure. Yeah.
All right. Tairn's gonna die, guys. Like
Tairn is gonna die.
Tairn's gonna die.
He's gonna die.
Sorry.
Yeah.
He is Dumbledore. He is Gandalf. He is Merlin. He's gonna die. I'm shocked if he makes it out of book 4, if I'm being honest.
Well, I think he'll make it to book 5 because unless Andarna came back healed, like Violet will need to ride.
I think she might have. I have thought about this. Yeah, I think she might have.
Yeah. If she did, like maybe we lose Tairn in book 4. Yeah.
Yeah. Like
I think Tairn is the loss of the series, so I feel like it's gonna be book 5.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But Dumbledore dies in book 6. I think there has to come a point where Violet has to figure it out on her own without Tairn. So, like, I think he probably dies in book 4, but we'll see.
I don't like it.
Especially if he's an Asher comp.
Yeah. Ugh. That's gonna be bad.
I know.
Good thing we don't have to deal with it until 2027.
I know. I was thinking about this. I'm like, I'm so excited that this book isn't coming out for 2 more years because I can just forget it all. Just forget all of this and then reread it.
I will be taking a full detox from this series.
As soon as we're done recording this pod, I don't want to hear about it anymore.
Yeah. Like, and then, of course, like, leading up to when the book comes out, I will reread everything and re-listen to everything and once again become unhinged. But until then, okay, my precog corner theory is unhinged. Like, I think this is like a fun thought experiment for me that I don't think I really believe, but I could see it. Okay, like I could. My theory. We've covered a lot of it because we've already talked about the dragon's connection to the gods and like defecting and all of that stuff. But I think there is a possibility that the Irids are all of the magic. All of it. We have heard nothing and no one describe anything as magic, even the earth, even life, nothing. The only places with magic are the continent, which has fired ward stones and at least a single Irid left.
You think one Irid did all this?
Yes. Yeah, maybe. Or maybe they've been hidden and their grounds have been here the whole time. There's hundreds of them. They say that there's hundreds. There's 200 dragons that part from Basgiath to Orisha, and there's hundreds of Irids.
Yeah.
And then Zahilna has some trace magic, but we know that they were just really close to where the Irids were. So I think there's a possibility that it was literally just the Irids. And I'm not even convinced that that's where they really live. I think it's possible that they just are wherever they are is magic. Like wherever they are is magic. And so I mean, the theory behind that, and again, we talked about a little bit of it, but I think hypothesizing that the Irids have all magic is kind of crazy, but like, the dragons are connected to the gods. That is headcanon for me. The Irids were the only breed allowed to retain their inherent magic because the others agreed to gift humans their magic, damning them, damning the humans. So those dragons were left with a finite amount of power. They can only regenerate that power through staying alive and creating new life. That's why the hatching grounds have some magic and are sacred. The other breeds put everything on the line by containing themselves to Navarre, betting on the humans' ability to coexist with them and be good, and the sole Irid left behind was the only raw magic that they were given.
Okay, here's my slight issue with your theory.
Mm-hmm.
An Irid has bonded to a human. And if your timeline works, then it only takes one dragon for the gods to take away the magic.
Yeah, so it could all totally be fucked. But Violet was touched by Dune, and Violet generates pure power because of Andarna. Andarna has her own source. Violet generates her own magic, and she's already been touched by gods.
Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy, but
I mean,
that's what it's
I,
for.
I, I guess I'm just saying if we follow your train of thought, the Irids would lose their inherent magic now that Andarna has bonded to a human. And they were leaving behind Andarna to bond to a human. Well, maybe.
Maybe.
Right? So wouldn't that damn them? Like, wouldn't they
It
be
could be.
damning themselves?
Well, have any priestesses or anything bonded dragons? I don't know whether like somebody touched by God would draw the same consequence.
Well, that's a good question. I doubt it, right? Because we know that children used to be able to be dedicated to gods, but now that's outlawed. But was it when you were dedicated to a god, could you still grow up and go and join the Rider Squadron, or did you have to go to temple? I don't know.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. But I think I mean, they note, right? And I'm kind of curious how they're going to address this. So the 12 dragon eggs, no, 6 dragon eggs were stolen, right? And Dane says when he's being quizzed on by Norel, or like with Norel, no, Dane, when Violet was convincing him that they were dealing in dragons, he says, I believe her. It's just going to take me a minute to absorb it. One does not just deal in dragons, let alone taking babies to isles that don't have magic. And so I don't know. I mean, I assume that hatching grounds can exist without magic inherent, but like it is interesting that
Well, this is
no
my
hatching grounds other than the Irids exist off continent.
this is kind of my thinking, right? Like we are told, yes, maybe the hatching grounds for the black dragons are Orisha, but maybe first it was Unbriel and they left, and that's why there's no magic on Unbriel anymore. It's not because the Venin were there, it's because the dragons left and they took the magic with them.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, but they also left everywhere else on the continent except for Sgaeyl.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. Maybe it takes time. I don't know. Maybe it's not a good theory. I feel like I had a follow-up thought from what you said, but I can't remember anymore.
Well, I also just want to think more about like so that deal didn't go through, right? The ones with during the Crovlin uprising when like they couldn't
Right.
ultimately go through with the eggs, and I kind of want to know why that wasn't possible. This is going away from peacock theory. Like forget that theory for a second. I want to know, well, kind of. I want to know why that wasn't possible because now they've been taken, right? And they're like hypothetically going somewhere, maybe to the Isles. And so I'm wondering like, all right, we know that Andarna came back, which also means maybe that Leothan or the Irids or somebody is willing enough to be associated with them at this point. Like, do the Irids have to play a role in establishing hatching grounds in the Isles where magic doesn't exist?
No, I think this gets back to Tairn being part of the Empyrean, right? So I think Eric explains the plan to Tairn, explains to
Tairn
him
says,
this
okay.
has to
Yeah.
happen, and Tairn says, okay.
Yeah, fair.
Yeah. So the I did have another quote. And I actually think this ties into this. I didn't bring it up because I couldn't work this in, but let me find it. Do not mistake a dragon's bond for fealty. If you expect a dragon to choose their rider over the well-being of their own kind, prepare for 2 things, disappointment and death, right? Which I think is very relevant to the end of Onyx Storm, right? We are kind of set up to believe that Sgaeyl is doing what she does because she loves Zayden. But this quote right here is telling us that that is not how dragons operate. Whatever Sgaeyl is doing, she's doing for the good of dragonkind, which again leads me to believe that this is the only way out for the dragons too. I don't know. Also, the 2 dragon eggs of each kind makes no sense based on what we talked about earlier in this episode, right? You do not need
6.
right now
So
it's 6. Now it's 6, but you don't
that
need
makes more
dragons
sense.
of the same kind, right? Right.
Yeah.
Just shows you that Unbriel doesn't actually know anything.
Yeah. Well, I can't remember the exact quotes now, but they definitely said some things that like did not make any sense about dragons that showed that they like didn't know anything about how dragons work.
Well, also their eggs. They could have grabbed 6 males, right? And
Yeah.
then you're just fucked. Like then
Yeah.
you're not having dragon babies.
Yeah, true. But now will there be an Empyrean of the Isles?
I think so.
I
think so.
Interesting.
I think each hatching ground has an Empyrean, maybe. I don't know. Or not necessarily. I don't know. But I definitely think there's at least 2 Empyreans.
Oh, okay.
All right. Anything else?
No, just I'm excited to learn more about the dragons. That's probably like of the things I'm most excited for in the next book. Like everything else I kind of dread, to be honest. Like whatever happens with Zayden, like I'm nervous about it. Whatever happens with Violet, I'm nervous about it. I'm actually excited to learn more about our dragon friends.
I think, yeah. I think we need to find out what their original sin was.
Yeah.
So there is one.
There's totally an original sin story. Like
yeah.
100%. I think I said this in the last episode. Like, there's original sin.
Cool. All right.
Okay. Well, as always, we we welcome feedback. Comment. We're on TikTok and Instagram as Dragon in the Details Pod is our handle, or you can directly email us feedback, questions, topics you want us to cover, dragons in the details pod at gmail.com. We welcome disagreement. You should bring proof.
We're also on YouTube.
We are also on YouTube, yeah. Let's just do a quick roundup of where, I mean, obviously if you found this, you are listening to wherever you listen to podcasts. But we are on Amazon, Spotify.
All of them. We're on all of them now.
Yeah. Apple, YouTube. Wherever you listen to podcasts, you can find us.
Yeah, I think. I don't know. I'm new. But yes, definitely Spotify, Apple, and Amazon. And then there's other ones in there too that I had never heard of before. But I think we're everywhere.
All right.
All right. Until next time.
See you next time.
Bye.
Bye.